Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard the Financial Independence Podcast.
G'day, and welcome to another episode of Captain Fi, the Financial Independence Podcast, where I open the cockpit to some of the best and brightest in personal finance, as well as those who have reached or are on their way to financial independence. Before we get started, remember, nothing said here is financial advice, and you should always do your own independent research before making any financial choices. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the episode and learn something new. G'day, welcome on board another episode of the Captain Fi podcast. And today, finally, an episode I've wanted to do for so long is Sharesight. So on board today is Prashant Mohan. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of Sharesight. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Sharesight is and how investors can use Sharesight on the path to financial independence and automate their financial administration. Prashant, how you going, mate?
Thanks so much. Tom, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. Doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. It's a really nice sunny day here in Adelaide. It's the morning. I've got all the blinds down. I'm doing my best to keep all of the noise out to try and improve the quality of the sound. I'm locked away in the dungeon recording, mate. What's it like in Sydney?
Oh, it's great, rainy, and feels like it's going to flood.
Prashant, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to working with Sharesight?
Yeah, I began my career as a software engineer working on telco switches, and then subsequently started working more towards consumer technology with Philips, where I was more of a technical product manager. Went for an MBA, and that's got into the world of finance. Actually, Westpac came recruiting to our campus. And that was an eye-opening experience because I'd never worked for a bank or a financial institution, and was quite a drastic change moving from more of an engineering side into the economics and commercial side of things. So that taught me a lot. Also went through the big merger of St. George Bank and Westpac. I was part of that project. And then I got an opportunity to visit lots of lovely parts of regional New South Wales as a strategy and ops manager, visiting beautiful little country towns and actually seeing the impact that a local bank people's lives. So that was terrific in terms of the experience I got. Subsequent to that, I got a job with Google Australia as the strategy and operations manager again, where I worked on various parts of online marketing strategy and also YouTube. Again, like a fascinating experience. And since then, I started working for more of the smaller fintechs. I worked through Smart Group, which is actually listed now on the ASX as SIQ, and then Prosper, which also got listed a small business online lender, and which led me to the role currently at Sharesight, where I've just completed over 4 years. The opportunity came about because I was a user, and then I got approached by a recruiter for this particular role and have thoroughly enjoyed the experience since then.
That's a pretty amazing resume. Working in Google and YouTube, they're pretty highly sought after positions. And just like having a look at Sharesight's SEO footprint, I think that experience really shows because it's something you guys have done really well in terms of the SERP results, on-page SEO and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I had an inkling that somebody had some kind of knowledge of how it all works. So it's you that's driving the team, mate. So well done.
Thank you, but it's really the team. I can't take too much credit. Yeah, I know a thing or two. I have an amazingly talented team that looks after all the detailed parts of the website.
Humble, good sign of leadership. Good sign of leadership. It's funny how many engineers end up interested in finance. I wonder if it's just because like you're good at maths or something, you just naturally get drawn to like the efficiency side of the house.
I think there is something there, and I think it's also a certain element of the DIY-ness of engineering. So you're always trying to unpack things and figure out what's inside, and that helps with finance as well. So I think it just helps you go one step deeper into the questions and not just take things on face value. You're always trying to figure out how does this thing really work? And that's possibly one reason. And of course, the maths background definitely helps as well.
I know we haven't gone into too much of it just yet, but one of the things that I love about Sharesight is it does it all for me, so I don't have to use those engineering skills anymore when I'm doing my tax returns. But let's launch into it. Prashant, for people who haven't come across it. And really, if you're listening to this podcast, you definitely should have come across it because I've talked about it heaps. But for the benefit of people taking it back to step one, what is Sharesight and how does it work?
The easiest way to describe it is it's a portfolio tracker for self-directed investors. What that means is you can record and track all your stock trades, your managed funds, even some crypto, forex, and so on across multiple brokers. And it helps you consolidate everything in one place. The other beauty of it is it depends on the level of simplicity or complexity you want to go into. It gives you the true return of your investments. And I like to call it like the Fitbit for investing. And whether you go exercise in a gym or go for a walk, it's all recorded on your wearable fitness tracker. That's exactly what Sharesight is. So whatever your broker, whichever market you invest in, we are able to automate everything. And you are able to see in one snapshot how you're actually performing financial and investing wise.
Yeah, I love it. The Fitbit for investing. That's great. Okay, so another question I was going to ask Prashant is that you and I, we've both been using Sharesight for a long time. We know why we use it. We know what's good about it. But for someone who hasn't used Sharesight before, or maybe someone who hasn't even started investing yet or seriously yet, why should they use Sharesight versus an Excel spreadsheet or similar?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. And especially to address those people who are unaware of the problem, I would begin with actually a Charlie Munger quote, one of his famous ones that says, "Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome." And so for those people who don't even know that they need a spreadsheet to track, they just rely on them. They should realize that brokers actually make money when you trade, particularly if you trade frequently and in larger chunks. So that's their incentive. All the technology and behavioral psychology built into a brokerage is actually to help you and encourage you to trade more frequently. Now, there are exceptions to that. There are some really good brokers that I respect that are trying to do the anti-broker thing, but otherwise most brokers actually want you to trade more and more frequently. So that's the number one part of why what information you get from your brokerage is not really aligned to investing, it's much more aligned to trading. The next part is without Sharesight, what you get is more of a half-baked and incomplete information about your actual investment. If you look at the information that your broker shows you, it's pretty much the price when you bought a particular stock versus the current price. And it's not a complete picture of all the information about your investment. Second part is that they don't actually factor in any dividend information. So most of your listeners would rely on dividend income in some form. So that's completely missing from your broker. And if you had to do that on a spreadsheet, it's a pretty laborious process. I think if you actually wanted to try it, it's of course possible to do it on a spreadsheet, but with Sharesight, it's nicely automated and pretty seamless. So that's another part of why you need Sharesight. The third part is if you have any kind of foreign investments, the tax office, as well as for your own record keeping purposes, you need to keep tab of any kind of currency fluctuations. There's no point knowing that a particular stock in the US or an ETF in the US went up by X percentage points if you don't know actually how does that convert to Australian dollars. And that's where the currency fluctuation comes into play. And that's a pretty important part. And again, you can do that on a spreadsheet, of course, but it's just a lot more work. And a lot of times, these spreadsheets get untenable and they break. The fourth part is actually something, again, that's relevant to people who invest very frequently. The idea of dollar cost averaging and cash inflows and outflows. So that's something that your broker does not really take into consideration. And to again work that out on a spreadsheet, it's a lot of work. And that's where your Sharesight account becomes a really important tool and a friend of yours in your investing journey. So to summarize it, all of these things, tomorrow if you get another broker that actually is able to give you a lower cost of brokerage. You can move with the complete freedom and understanding that your portfolio, your cost basis, everything is safe and sound inside of Sharesight. And so you can consolidate your positions from multiple brokers all into one place and with just with the click of a button. And I think that summarizes why people should use Sharesight on their investing journey.
Great answer. Couldn't have said it better myself. We were talking about this before, and I just say, well, yeah, of course you'd use it. It's free. But I think once people get into it and start actually using it, they use it for any period of time, they'll probably realize just how useful it is. So awesome. No, I appreciate that. I've just been looking in my Sharesight account now because I'm trying to get things ready for tax return, which is coming in the next few months. But a question I always had was, how does Sharesight actually get the data for your trades and things? Like, do you just have to manually plug it in, or how does that automation work?
There's multiple ways of getting that information into Sharesight. So certainly manually plugging in your trade data is one way, but there's a number of other ways as well. So if you have a lot of trades from a particular broker, one way is actually to just download all the trades as a CSV and then upload it. And Sharesight will reconcile all the buys and sells and create this entire portfolio for you. The second method is actually one of my favorite ones, which is actually by forwarding all your contract notes or trade confirmation emails from your brokers. And what that does is when you open a Sharesight account, every user gets given a unique portfolio email address. And when you forward your contract notes or trade confirmation emails to that email address, it automatically creates the trade inside of Sharesight. And you can see your portfolio in that auto. And the third one is with some brokers, we have an API integration. And through the API integration, literally every buy and sell is actually connected to Sharesight. And that way you can immediately see any of your transactions as well as your portfolio inside of Sharesight. So there's 4 different totals, so including the manual method, depending on the forwarding of trade confirmation emails is for me personally as a Sharesight user. The reason for that is when you forward the trade confirmation email, not only does the trade get created, but also the contract note, which is a PDF that comes along with your broker email, that gets saved as an attachment against that particular trade as well. So if you want to maintain a good system of record, your accountant will be so thrilled to see that every single transaction is recorded nicely. And it's also for your own personal audit trail, just to make sure that you have records of everything in one place.
Oh, that's so funny. I've recently been trying to submit my BAS statement for my business, and I've learned that keeping the bookkeeper and accountant happy is the name of the game. If you want to succeed in business, you've got to keep them happy. So that's a good thing for your personal tax return as well.
Absolutely. And that's what we find. I personally use an accountant. And changes as an investor and as a general person who has to file taxes is the nature of your conversation changes from just data gathering. You're not like scurrying around to look into your shoebox in various emails and attachments all over the place to a single place, and you just share access with your accountant, and they have access to all your transactions in one place. And I think that's where the nature of the time you spend with your accountant changes from a data gathering one to much more of an advice-based conversation.
Yeah, I think having it automated is the name of the game. We were talking about this before we started recording. We were talking about the Barefoot Investor and how I think we both got some of the Barefoot Investor share recommendations. And at one point, I had this behemoth of an Excel spreadsheet, and I was trying to track buys and sells and dividends, and it just became overwhelming. And that was actually when I found Sharesight because it was mentioned in one of the forums, and then got onto it. And for starters, I couldn't believe that it was free. And then obviously it's a freemium service, so you can have the the intro level account is free, and then as you want more shares or more services, you start to pay. But it really did make my life a heck of a lot easier, basically just being able to click buttons to see reports. So I wanted to ask, from your opinion, what are some of the best tools available in Sharesight? I've used the tax summary, I've used the CGT calculator, but what other tools in there can people use?
Yeah, there's a number of really cool tools. And before I get into that, firstly, a little bit of your situation of that unmanageable spreadsheet that gets more and more complicated. And that is exactly the founding story of Share. We were actually founded by a father and son, Wellington in New Zealand, actually. And the father had a spreadsheet just like yours that was breaking all over the place. And Tony said to Scott, his son, saying, hey, can you do something for this? And that's how Scott started building Sharesight. And it's a fascinating story just because it's solving that exact problem as an investor, not as a techie who has all the knowledge. It's coming from a complete problem-solving perspective that it was started. But to come back to your question on some of my favorite tools inside of Sharesight, particularly at this time in the tax season, if you call it that, one of my favorite tools is this report called the Unrealized Capital Gains Tax, which is an expert plans of Sharesight. What that does is actually help you with tax plan. And by tax planning, if you incur any kind of gains or losses, you can actually offset them against one another. And what the Unrealized Capital Gains Tax report helps you do is actually model various outcomes for yourself based on what methodology you choose. So the ATO allows a number of methods by which you can actually offset some of your gains versus losses. And as the saying goes, without getting any too much specifics, this is a really good way to actually model out what your tax outcome is going to be. And just some feedback from customers and users, that's one of the most powerful tools I hear from everyone saying, just the amount of tax you save by using that as a planning tool will pay several times your subscription for Sharesight. So I always start with that as one of my favorite tools. As an investor, there's some other tools that are really useful as well. I always love to look at the share checker. So Share basically is a tool that helps you determine how a hypothetical investment of $10,000 would have performed in the period of your choosing. So whether it be 10 years or 5 years, and there's a number of drop downs in that menu you can use. Now, the beauty of this tool versus, say, just putting the same stock into Google Finance, for example, the difference is it factors in every single dividend that this stock has received. You also get to see all corporate actions. So example of corporate action is, say, a stock split, or if any bonus shares have been awarded, all of that gets presented in this share checker. Quick investigative tool to determine the worthiness of a particular stock investment. That's a really useful tool.
Yeah, I've actually used that quite a bit in some of my ETF and LIC reviews because it took me a while, but when I figured out the impact, particularly for Australian shares, of dividends in the index performance, you've got to compare apples with apples.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people
Absolutely.
they were comparing like the accumulation index to just like a stock price index. And I found that people can manipulate data sets to support their arguments, but if they're not comparing, apples with apples, then the argument's pretty much nil. So that's what I quite like, the fact that it does include dividends reinvested. So then you do actually get an understanding of an accumulation index style return rather than just the base share price.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's why it's really important, and you're absolutely right about this, that for the Australian stock market in particular, dividends play a really important role, and actually pretty much globally everywhere except for probably the tech stocks. Dividends play a really important role. It's the same thing we find with our UK customers as well. You have a lot of British stocks. They also pay a lot of dividends. And it's really important to get the complete picture of your investment or a potential investment. Right now in the market cycle where we are, if you didn't look at dividends, you would feel really sad for yourself. So just further, some other tools that I think are really useful. And like you mentioned, I think the capital gains tax, again, very useful. The end of financial year, you want to see if you've had any sale of stocks. You can see actually how the capital gains is impacted. The other one is actually the taxable income report. In particular, I like to look at the monthly dividend income. I think for much of the FIRE community, that's an extremely useful and important measure as well, because it gives you a good idea of cash flow from within your portfolio and see actually how much passive income you're able to generate from your investments. The other beauty of it is, yes, for stocks and managed funds, it's all completely automated. But you can also incorporate, if you have, say, an investment property, you can actually manually add some of these investment properties and unquoted assets as well, and treat the rental income as similar to a dividend income. That way, you're able to see pretty much the cash flow you're able to generate from your investments. So I love using that. Actually, what income you've made, you can also then model out and see which months are more income generating, i.e. which months give you more dividends. There's typically 2 peaks for dividends being declared in Australia, and you can model out your lifestyle according to that as well. So I find that really useful. And finally, the other one is looking at your upcoming dividend information from the holdings that you own. And in that tool, what you can see is actually dividends that have already been declared, what's the level, and that's again really useful as a overall balanced investor. But yeah, I think these would be some of my top ones. A more recent report that I'm personally very excited about is this one called the multi-period report. And the multi-period report is, if you think of yourself as the fund manager of your own portfolio, you know how these fund managers put out like sophisticated reporting, the 1-year return, 3-year return, 5-year return, and so on. You can do that for yourself as your own fund manager of your portfolio. That's only available in our expert plan, but the multi-period report actually helps you determine the performance of your portfolio or a particular holding or investment within your portfolio, and you can compare it against 3 different periods or distinct periods. So that's again really useful to see if there's a particular event or seasonality caused a particular rise in a stock or dividend income or what have you.
It's funny, as we're talking about this, because I've got my Sharesight account open in the window next to me and I'm having a look at it, and I literally just clicked 3 buttons on the multi-period report and it's popped up literally all of the investment returns that I've had over the last 5 years. And yeah, 1st of July 2020 to the 30th of June 2021 was a good year. This year's not looking so good though.
Yeah, I think for most of us this isn't that great, but yeah, last year was fantastic.
Actually, I was going to ask you about the alternate assets, and yeah, I think you've touched on it perfectly. So I guess the crypto, is that connected to the exchanges, or with the cryptocurrencies, is that still like a manual entry, or can you do the same API as you could with the share trades?
At the moment, it's all manual entry.
Yep.
But we are working on something that will make it a lot more sophisticated and automated, similar to the share trading side.
Yeah.
But that's still some time away.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely on our roadmap.
Yeah, but once it's been manually entered into Sharesight, then it grabs the price information from the exchanges, and then you can just look at it just like any share.
That's right, yeah. So the pricing information, it's just how you get that information into Sharesight that still needs some work. And yeah, we're going to be working on that.
And so I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, going to be finishing my investment property soon. It's been a roller coaster of emotions. And so when I enter that into Sharesight, so it's a manual entry for property. On the roadmap, is there anything that's going to automatically scrape property prices, things like RP data or council values or anything like that?
We don't have anything on the immediate horizon for that, but that's a great idea. It definitely will go into a backlog, and yeah, we do the prioritization based on how many people request it.
Yeah, property pricing, it's so confusing. It's like the price really comes down to what someone's going to pay for it. I don't know a lot about property. That'd be a cool feature.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we've talked about, but haven't come to a solid conclusion on whether we go down that path or not.
Yeah, I think the majority of people are really going to be using it for shares. So that's probably the priority. All right, so crunch time, right? With the tax reportings, can I print off my tax report and just hand that to the ATO or do my own tax online? Or do I really need to take that tax report from Sharesight and still use a tax agent?
That's a great question. Actually, it just depends on how much you love accounting and doing your own taxes. I don't do them myself because I struggle to put in the mental energy to do my taxes. But if I did have the energy and enthusiasm to do my own taxes, I would be able to do it using Sharesight. So between Sharesight and the autofill that comes up on the ATO's portal, you would be able to do it yourself. I know some of my colleagues who do it themselves, but they are literally tax geeks. They love doing taxes and they love doing a lot of creation. But even if you do use an accountant, I think you will save a lot of their time and therefore your accountant will. Because it does a lot of the data, it does a lot of the automation, record keeping, and that audit trail that makes their job so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where the real benefit is. It's not a tax filing solution, so you can directly press a button and submit the returns to the tax office or anything of that nature, but it definitely helps you track the information that's necessary towards
Oh,
going.
let's add that to the roadmap, Prashant. Hook me up with some of those colleagues that are really into reconciliation because I got some taxes they can do if they're that interested.
Yeah, sure. I always envy their patience and the ability to focus on that level of detail.
Actually, it is funny because I used just a H&R Block for years, just like a generic tax
Yeah.
franchise. And they were great. But as my tax returns have become progressively more complex, it started costing more and more. And then I'm handing them the Sharesight report. I'm going, come on, guys, this has done your job for you. Why are you charging me so much? And the lady I had was really nice. And she's like, oh, it's company policy. You've got to charge you like $10 per dividend or whatever it was. And so, yeah, in the end, I've gone to a specialist accountant, and he's brilliant with the bookkeeper and the accountant. So together, it ends up being a lower cost. And I think, yeah, exactly as you said, handing them the Sharesight with the reconciliation, all of the codes are there, like the foreign income, the Australian dividend, the franking credits, everything. Yeah, they're smarter than me. They've got more patience than me, but they just enter it all in, and then I get a nice tax return every year, which is good.
Yeah, no, that's the beauty of it. Like, really important point, like you said about foreign income. One of the things that Sharesight does is it also translates all your foreign income and holding information pretty much on a daily basis. So if you have a US stock and the tax office requires you to maintain records in both currencies, and that's another scene that Sharesight is immensely useful, where at any given point in time, you can see the valuation in both currencies or multiple currencies. If you want to value your portfolio in Bitcoins, you can do that as well. We have a report called the multi-currency valuation report, but just for practical purposes, just having record of everything in both currencies is really useful as well.
Yeah, so it seems to me the bottom line here is that you should be using Sharesight. There's really no drawbacks. It's pretty easy to set up. It's automated. And if you're an ETF investor with under 10 stocks, it's free. How do you guys do that? Like, how can you offer a free plan? Because I imagine a lot of people in the FI community, they're only going to have a handful of stocks.
Yeah.
So, like, are you guys losing a lot of money offering a free plan?
Are we losing money? Can we be making more money? I think the answer is definitely yes. But I think fundamentally, what we believe is in that better financial education part and also being the boring voice of reason in a world where multiple participants want you to be very aggressive with your changes and with your trading and so on. And so I think we're just sticking to our fundamental principles of, just providing some really valuable stuff. And because the first 10 holdings are free, we know that as people become more sophisticated in their investing, as well as when they get older, the tracking needs get more and more complex. We will anyway eventually over time. The other part is because so many people use our product, it's a must-have for literally every Australian investor. We do get a lot of mouth from them as well. And we try to tackle it that way, saying, hey, if more people use it, and a portion of those people will have more complex needs for which they need to start paying a subscription fee. So I think going as broad as possible and being as useful as possible to the most number of people is our current strategy.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it, providing a valuable service. And for people that do have some more advanced, whether they want to manage a larger fund or they're stock picking or they've inherited a large portfolio of stocks and for whatever reason they don't want to sell them down and they're going to need those advanced plans, how much does it cost and what do you get for a paid versus the free option?
Yeah, sure thing. So, like you mentioned, the first 10 holdings are absolutely free, but subsequently, we have 3 tiers of plans for self directed investors. We have the starter plan, which gives you up to 20, and that comes to about $19 per month on an annualized basis. So you prepay for the year, and that's $19 a month. For the investor plan, that's $29, and you get 4 portfolios and a number of other more sophisticated reporting tools with it. And then at the top end, you have $49 a month, the expert plan, which gives you 10 portfolios and even more sophisticated reporting as part of that. And the 10 portfolios geared towards people who are tracking multiple sets of a portfolio. From our definition is a tax entity. So if you're a family entity, you have some stocks of your own, your partner has some stocks, and the 2 of you together have some stocks, and then you start investing for your kids. So you can track each of these entities separately to manage them as individual portfolios. And that's the cohort of people that we are trying to cater to through that. Of course, if you use the Captain Fi code, it's all much more discounted than the prices that I just mentioned.
Yes, and thank you very much. I do appreciate offering listeners a discount. What do they get, like 4 months or something for free?
Yes. So 4 months for free when you take up the annual plan.
Yeah, okay. So with the expert plan, are these geared towards, if you're an accountant or a fund manager, can you use Sharesight to manage your clients' portfolios, or is that sort of not allowed?
Yeah, so actually for those types of scenarios, we actually have what is called the Sharesight Pro product, and that is for an accountant or an advisor to manage on behalf of their clients. What that enables is actually having a 3-way conversation between the client, an advisor, and as well as the product of Sharesight. It makes that communication really straightforward. One of the things that we hear from advisors in particular is the fact that they need to track and communicate about every single corporate action that happens within a client's portfolio. If they use Sharesight, they're then able to share access to the client's portfolio, and in real time, both parties are communicated about any kind of corporate action, be it a stock split or a dividend declaration. Everything is very transparently communicated across all parties. And the same thing goes for accountants as well. I think that constant communication and being able to keep in touch with the portfolio so that they are able to help their clients with tax planning, with some critical information on how actually they view their portfolio. I think from that point of view, the Sharesight Pro is a much more suited product for those needs.
So basically, get on it. It sounds too good to not be using. That's awesome, Prashant. You pretty much wrapped up everything I wanted to ask about Sharesight itself. Now, I wanted to change gears and ask you a little bit more personal questions about your career and investing journey, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. So you mentioned a little bit about your career journey at the start of the podcast and how you came across working for Westpac. I just wanted to ask, in terms of your professional career, why have you made the switch from software engineering into fintechs? And if there's anything that you could go back and tell yourself now, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, to begin with, I think the software engineering was a good start. And then what I realized quickly was I interacted much better with people than with software code. And so I wanted to get into more understanding of customer and consumer psychology. So subsequently, I took up a role at Philips in more of the consumer marketing side, more of the technical product marketing role. And as I got into more finance stuff, I realized one of two things, that more finance and tech together can actually democratize a lot of parts of things that were held by a select few. And I saw the opportunity in actually jumping into fintechs, as well as I had this love for marketing always. And I saw the combination come through with my first breakthrough, which was at Smart Group. It's actually a listed ASX company now, SIQ. And then similarly with other opportunities that I've gotten as well. It was really a combination of being able to have that marketing bent, which is really about understanding people, understanding customers, but at the same time being able to provide with a product and work on a product that's really exciting and be on this journey to using technology to disrupt a lot of financial services. So that's generally been the theme of every opportunity that I've taken up. Of course, a lot of these things have been quite opportunistic from time to time. I can't really say that I plan to do it this way at every step, but as and when the broad roadmap was this, and whenever an opportunity appealed, I grabbed it. So that's pretty much been the theme of my professional career journey so far.
You come across as obviously a very intelligent person. The listeners can learn quite a lot from you. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your financial journey. What has your financial journey look like? I know we spoke earlier about we were both interested in the barefoot, but how's it gone? And do you have a FIRE number, for example? Yeah, are you into FIRE?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I would break up my financial journey into two separate innings. My first innings was back in India, late 90s. I was in the technology sector. Stock markets were booming. My first company was this big Indian IT company called Infosys, where I was already working. I was aware of technology companies, and literally in the euphoria of the 90s, there was nothing more than technology to look at me. And there was folklore in Bangalore, which is where I used to live then, of Indian IT companies, bus drivers being millionaires because of their stock options. In hindsight, I realized that was my first exposure to a concentration risk, because I realized only 2 years later that portfolio crashed quite a bit in the crash of the early 2000s. Actually, one of the client companies that I used to work for, really funny, sad story about this company called Nautil Networks. I used to work on their products. And the sad story was that the story went like that if instead of investing in Nautil, if you had bought beers and then sold the beer bottles for recycling, you still made more money than what was left. So that brought an abrupt end to my first innings in the tech investing story. My second innings was a lot more considered. That was after I'd moved to Australia. And like how we mentioned, the first foray back into the stock markets was thanks to the education from the Barefoot Investor. And I loved him because not only was he really good at conveying his concepts, he's also a great marketer, actually. And I always found really good appeal to people who are able to convey complex things in a very simple manner. That's how like we discussed, one of my first Aussie portfolio companies was the Australian Foundation Investment Company. And that really started off my considered investment Second, as for how I've been going about it, it's obviously went into a fair few stock picks, but since then I've modified it, saying I actually don't have the time to actually research every company. So been more and more diversifying portfolios through ETFs. So more broad ETFs, index funds, as well as some specific thematic in ETFs. That's where I'm currently looking at as a portfolio. As far as my FIRE number, at the moment, I don't have a specific number in mind. I'm just loving the journey itself. I'm almost scared that if I put a number and I reach that destination, I will not look at the journey with as much enthusiasm. So I think it's just taking a very considered approach. And one fantastic thing that I've learned from the FIRE movement is just the intentionality of it all. I think it's applicable to more areas than just finance and budgeting. It's applicable to a number of other areas as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think that was a big thing that drew me into FIRE was the why of FIRE. Like, why did I want to invest? Why did I want to produce passive income? And it came back to I wasn't happy where I was in life and I possibly wasn't enjoying the journey as much as I could have. And so for me, that was why I got into it. I've taken so much out of it. So it's cool that you recognize that you don't need to go all crazy overboard into FIRE, but you can just pick out the bits that are going to actually benefit you.
Absolutely. And honestly, I've been impressed with the content and access that people like you are creating. This is something that's completely lacking in the market. Understand how to go about these things. On the one hand, I love reading and listening to legendary investors, but how do you make it simple and accessible to people that you can relate to? And I think that's the beauty of the FIRE movement. And I've gotten a lot of confidence out of it. And I think a lot of other people as well would get out of it. So it's not necessarily about whether you are on the FIRE journey yourself, but the content and the education that's being put out by people on this journey is phenomenal. And I think it's almost like a substitute to the high school personal finance that we did not have.
Exactly. I went down the academic route in school and I was pushed into engineering and maths, physics, chemistry, all that kind of stuff. And I really didn't learn anything about taxes, money, investment, budgeting. And I'm just glad that I can share my journey and that I can get people like yourself and ask about your journey. And we just bring it out into the open and hopefully try and remove some of the taboo about talking about money publicly.
I think it's brilliant. And the quote is the eighth wonder of the world is compounding. And just to reflect about it, it's actually magic. Just to convey a personal story about this, the other day I sat down with my 11-year-old son and tried to explain to him the concept of compounding. And just putting a simple Excel spreadsheet and putting in a number, explained it with the concept of pocket money. And in his case, it was more about Minecraft and Robux. And just explaining how compounding can take you to a completely different place. And the expression on his face just told me how complex this information is, and yet it's so simple. I think a lot of people need to pay attention to. It is indeed. And there's this other concept that I've been fascinated by. It's called the rule of 72, if I can explain that. The origins of it, I don't know, some people say Albert Einstein came up with it. And what this basically does is explain to you how long an investment would take to double in value. So you take 72 and divide 72 by the annualized return on any investment that you have. And this is where Sharesight comes in, right? So if you have your portfolio, let's say your portfolio has a return of 10%. So 72 over 10, so it's roughly about 7.2 years for your investment portfolio to double in value. Now that's not a long time. And that's where I think people understanding the concept of compound interest and how to play this game on a long term can powerfully change people's lives. And that's where a lot of the FIRE people, a lot of them have been extremely successful. Of course, you have the people like Mr. Money Mustache, and there's a number of other people as well. And especially the Australian FIRE movement, I've been so impressed by how many people there are, such great creators and content providers and really educators, if you call them, if you ask me my opinion, on actually how it is to live with intentionality and apply that to. I think that's been a big gift to society as a whole.
Yeah, I think when I read Mr. Money Mustache's article, The Shockingly Simple Math Behind Early Retirement, yeah, it was a bit of a wake-up call. I think it's beautiful that you're sitting down with your kids and explaining them. I have nephews that love spending money on Minecraft and Roblox as well. I think it's beautiful that you're actually conveying those lessons early. And I want to say, so for you, Prashant, what have been some of your biggest influences? Did your parents have those conversations with you, or what has been the biggest influence on your financial journey?
Yeah, a great question. So my dad was a maths professor and my mom was a history professor. And to be honest, they did sit down with me and teach me some basic stuff. Back in those days, I think they were much more into managed funds, investing. And my dad, being a maths professor, again, he was a big admirer of compounding as well. And my mom gave me a completely different perspective from history. And she would obviously tell me, our bedtime stories used to be various battles and various massive incidents of history and what all happened. But she always pointed out that most things from a historical context happened due to one of two reasons. One was a control of resources, and how that happened was actually through financing. This actually, after many years of internalizing this, coming to the modern day context, I've often asked this question on what makes a bigger impact. Can consumers make a bigger impact, or do investors make a bigger impact? And that's an entirely different topic. I would take too much of your time, but that's a topic of your own. But if you think about it, again, with intentionality, the biggest challenges of the modern day world is, let's say, climate change and what's happening around us as we speak. Both as a user and consumer, as well as an investor, we have the power to change the world.
It's pretty powerful stuff. I am learning more and more about the ethical investing side of the house. And again, Mr. Money Mustache has got a fantastic article on this, and I'll link it in the show notes. But yeah, it's pretty scary, even having recently been through the Black Summer bushfires in New South Wales. Yeah, climate change is real, and it's pretty scary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's happening really fast. Unfortunately, compounding works there as well. I think the messing up of the planet has had its own set of compounding effects, and that's something that we really need to do something about. So I think, whatever is possible within an individual perspective as well as a collective perspective, we need to make that happen.
One of the beautiful things that I think overlaps between when we're talking about climate change and being a responsible person and the FIRE movement is really that intentionality and really using only what you need and reducing that excess waste. And again, I think that links in with engineering and wanting to optimize things as well. So that's definitely a little interest of mine. Now, Prashant, I know you've mentioned so many little golden nuggets throughout today, but I just wanted to ask this again. If you could just summarize into a couple of points, what would be your top tips for someone who's on the path to financial independence?
Fantastic question. I think the first thing is actually to learn about financial education. And I think people like yourselves are putting out some amazing content out there. And I think being prepared and being educated about it is a really practical way to start the whole journey. The next step is I would actually go as far as saying that Sharesight is a really powerful tool as a practical tool, as an aid for any kind of financial independence journey. And the reason I say that is, to begin with, it's completely free. It's a powerful education tool because you get the complete picture of what you're actually trying to. If you just relied on your broker, it's incomplete. It's like having half of your mirror taken away and you're trying to drive, and a complete guide to everything. And I think there's a lot of good content out there, and I wouldn't go down on which specific investment to go into, but there's some fantastic educators out there who've said really good things. And a practical way on the side is actually to just get into Sharesight and just get started with your journey, whether it's a actual journey or even a theoretical journey. You could use it from both perspectives as well.
Yeah, so as in wargaming with the share checker, you can have a look at how things actually would perform theoretical portfolios.
Exactly. And I think like one of the best things about the financial independence movement is, like we mentioned, it's the whole intentionality. And there's so much going on for your attention, right? So there's marketers and products and advertising. There's so much going on where people are trying to put you in a box. They're always telling you that you're incomplete without something, without a certain product. And I think to just take a step back and look at things from an intentionality point of view, who are you trying to satisfy? Are you trying to help yourself and your family, or are you trying to keep up with the Joneses? And that's a really important question that the FIRE movement teaches you. And like to borrow, I love that one. It's not, there's no test. It's not, you're not living somebody else's life. You're living your own life. And as long as you have that all around your internal mind, I think that helps a lot in getting ready and prepared for this whole journey.
Prashant, it's been an absolute honour to have you on, mate. I'm really glad we got to have this chat. Been wanting to organise it for so long. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I just wanted to finish up and say, if listeners wanted to get in touch with you or learn more about Sharesight, how can they do that?
The best place to learn more about Sharesight is to jump onto the website, Sharesight, as well as there's a really good review that Captain Fi has put up as well. So make sure to go check out that review as well, which I believe is captainfi.com/Sharesight-review, available on LinkedIn or on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @PrashantMrao. I love hanging out on good education as well as interacting with anyone on a particular topic. So yeah, do hit me up or on any of these platforms.
Awesome. And I'll chuck all the links to all of those in the show notes, which will be up on the blog. Pretty much as soon as I get this edited and live, that'll be on there. Again, Prashant, thanks so much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's an honor being on this podcast.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Captain Fi Financial Independence Podcast. To read the transcripts or check out the show notes, head over to www.captainfi.com for all the details. If you have a question for the captain, make sure to get in touch. You might even make it on the airwaves. You can reach me online through the Captain Fi contact form or get in touch through the socials. I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, as well as a number of online finance and investing forums. And finally, remember, the information presented on the show and the links provided are for general information purposes only. They should not be taken as constituting professional financial advice. You should always do your own research when making any financial decisions and make sure it's appropriate for your personal circumstance.